I want to show you something beautiful and ancient. If you're like me, you probably think of the energy crisis as a modern 21st century problem. How much we need it.
Energy prices climbing twice as fast as inflation.
How we're going to get it.
The Nord Stream 2 pipeline between Russia and Germany.
For some, it's about the byproducts that come with energy.
The overwhelming scientific evidence for climate change.
For others, it's about access to it.
Natural gas now costs 10 times more.
And as the planet heats up and prices rise, the conversation around all of this has heated up too. But if we boil it all down, it's not a new conversation at all. Energy efficiency, turning the stuff around us into energy, is something that humans have been caring about for thousands of years. I want to show you the progress we've made, from huddling around a wood fire to nuclear plants and power grids. The breakthroughs our ancestors found, the hurdles we've overcome, and the trade-offs we made along the way to get where we are. This is the story of how humans learned to turn the world into power. Fuel efficiency really comes down to two things. First, there's the one you're probably thinking of. How much CO2 is released compared to how much energy we get. But CO2 hasn't really been on our radar very long. So to start, we're going to put that aside and focus on the more basic efficiency question. How much energy can we get out of a thing, a fuel source, and how much energy are we losing along the way? First up, firewood. It's the year 1000, and you and your family, like your ancestors before you, are living in a cramped log cabin. To heat the cabin, you need energy, heat. So you gather firewood. There are 100 megajoules of energy in the average log. In a perfectly fuel-efficient world, all of this energy could be yours. But that's not how it works. There are tolls that have to be paid along the way. First, it takes energy to get the fuel, this log of firewood. At this stage in human history, that cost isn't too high, but energy is energy. You put in 240 calories of energy to swing the axe, and that comes out to 1 megajoule of energy that you had to spend to get that 100 megajoule log of firewood. But so far, we're still up 99 megajoules. Pretty good. But then you throw that log on your ancient fireplace, and 85% of the heat from that log goes out the chimney as hot smoke. Only a tiny bit of heat actually sticks around to heat the room. And so after the energy that you had to spend to get it, and the energy you lost up the chimney, you've only gained about 14% of the energy that was in the log to begin with. Not good.
This is my world.
But things are starting to change for firewood. Now it's the 1600s, and you live in a small city. You can't just cut down trees near your house anymore. Instead, lumberjacks are logging plots of land outside your city. Cool, but this means that now there's another toll along the way. Everything's the same, but now energy also has to be spent, again in the form of calories, from people who haul that log from the forest to your home. And so ultimately, you net less energy. To be clear, you don't think of it this way. The same amount of heat still comes out of the log once you get it. But what you do notice is that now you're paying a lot of money for it, for that energy. Inefficiency is expensive. And that problem's gonna come back, but good news, you just hit the Industrial Revolution. Locomotives themselves need fuel. We still have to spend energy to move firewood. But compared to hauling it with human or animal calories, far less energy has to be spent to get that log to your house. You're still losing a lot of energy from those logs as heat out of your chimney at the end. But now, at least the transport part is way better. This forestry thing, your town gathering all its wood in one place, finally works. And that makes you happy because the price just dropped. But this is where we have to talk about CO2, because something new is happening. New CO2 that wasn't even in this log to begin with, is being released along the way, pouring out of these smokestacks. It isn't much, but it marks a shift in how all of this works. Emissions were always part of using firewood, but now they are becoming part of transporting it too. But okay, the Industrial Revolution continues. And you've installed one of these new factory-made metal stoves. Remember how you were losing 85% of that heat out of the chimney? Well, now you're only losing 65%. Or as you would put it, you only need half as much firewood to heat your home. And because of this, a weird thing happens. Despite these new emissions getting the firewood to your house, better stoves mean you're getting more heat out of each log, and so you're burning fewer logs, and so the overall CO2 release to keep your house warm has actually gone down in this era. Also, in case it's not clear, we're looking at heating. Obviously, CO2 emissions skyrocketed during the Industrial Revolution. Humans started making a lot more stuff, but we're interested in efficiency. So how much CO2 has to be released to make or do a thing? And so we're focusing on heating a home because, well, humans have started making a lot more stuff. Heating is a need that has stayed very consistent over time. But now we're moving into the 1800s, and firewood is on the way out, and a new fuel, one that until now had just been used to power trains, was taking off. In the 20th century, coal is not thought of for its efficiency. But in the 1880s, people were amazed. After millennia of burning trainloads of wood, suddenly you had this tiny, black, lightweight rock. And once you lit it, it made heat for days. What they were celebrating was efficiency. First, we have this chunk of coal underground, again with 100 megajoules of energy trapped inside it. But there are some differences. First, coal is more energy dense than firewood. So 100 megajoules of coal is something far smaller than a log of wood. Next, compared to getting a log from the forest, getting this coal from the ground takes double the energy. And it's being mined with coal-powered machines, so it's not too hard to picture. To get this 100 megajoule piece of coal, you have to burn 2 megajoules of coal. Next, it's loaded onto trains, but coal is about a third lighter than firewood. This is part of what makes it so efficient. For every chunk of coal this size, the train only had to burn 1 megajoule of coal. And so up to this point, firewood and coal are tied. And same thing when it comes to emissions. Mining coal releases double the CO2, but transporting coal releases only half. Again, coal and firewood are tied. But then coal arrives at your door. And when you toss it into your new coal stove, it doesn't burst into flames and hot smoke. It smolders. The heat that used to fly out of your chimney, now half of that heat stays, becomes actual heat in your home. And as you upgrade to newer coal stoves and coal furnaces, that number only gets higher. With coal, your house is just as warm. And even though the role of CO2 in the atmosphere isn't something that humans understand yet, what you do notice is that far less smoke is leaving your chimney each day. And you wonder, how could things get much better than coal? And then there's a giant leap. It's the 1950s, and natural gas is changing the state of energy. Literally. And this was a major advantage. It still had to be drilled and processed, but while other fuel sources had to be shipped on trains, burning fuel along the way, natural gas could just be connected. And this is great for you. Your country has built gas lines that stretch across the continent. And for a moment in time, CO2 emissions for this transport stage completely disappear.
Natural gas is chosen because it's clean and efficient.
Once the fuel is in your home, your coal furnace used to lose all this heat out the chimney. Now, almost all of that heat is sticking around. In fact, you don't even need a chimney anymore. Just this small vent on the side of your house. When you subtract the bit of energy that was used at the start and the bit that escaped out the vent, 91% of the energy in natural gas becomes actual heat in your actual home. And with the task of hauling fuel being replaced with frictionless pipelines, we now have essentially no CO2 being released getting the fuel to your home. Natural gas is a massive leap forward in this endless quest for efficiency. Okay, so let's stop here for a second. Up to this point, each fuel source follows the same model. We get the fuel, we transport it to your home, and then you burn it. And that's still how a lot of this goes. But something's about to change. Now it's the 1960s, and you've just installed an electric baseboard heater.
Electric baseboard heat is the easiest to install.
All over your house, appliances are powered by electricity.
Today's appliance designers are putting many amazing principles to work in the home.
And now your heating is too.
She merely moves a lever and electric temperature.
Electricity is super cheap right now. And if you follow the power lines back from your house, on the other side you'll find a coal-fired power plant. This isn't a new fuel source. In fact, it's a return to an old one. The process for getting coal is pretty much exactly the same. The difference comes next. Once it's out of the ground, it isn't sent to homes on trains. It's converted into electricity and sent over wires. But the conversion is kind of a bad deal. In the plant, coal is burned to heat water. That water makes steam. The pressure of all that building steam turns a turbine. And that spinning turbine makes an electric current. But here's the thing. Heat is still being lost. In fact, a lot of heat is being lost out of a giant chimney this time. To send the energy through this transport stage, to get it into these wires, the vast majority of energy just escapes. Only a tiny fraction of the energy that was trapped in that coal ends up in these power lines.
Modern kitchens can select their indoor weather all year round.
There is a silver lining. Once the electricity reaches your electric heater, all of that energy becomes heat. It all stays in your home. Nothing is lost out the chimney or anything else. So we've eliminated the problem at this last part of the chain, but we've introduced a giant new problem here. Even compared to coal stoves, now this same chunk of coal in the ground ends up giving us less heat. It's not getting wasted out your chimney anymore. Now it's getting wasted in the process of turning heat into electricity, only for it to be turned back into heat. And so now we need to mine 3 times more coal and emit 3 times more CO2 to get the same heat. Compared to everything that came before it, this is a uniquely bad deal. But it's the 1960s, and for your family, electricity from coal is cheap, and so it makes sense for you. But now we're hitting the millennium, and coal is getting more controversial.
Tons of coal ash. It contains some nasty stuff.
More importantly, electricity is getting more expensive. Heating is now the biggest chunk of your electrical bill. And so you, and most people on your block, switch back to natural gas. In a way, we're back to square one. But that's not quite right. This little experiment using electricity for heat really mattered. In the old model of shipping fuel to a home or sending it through pipes, burning the fuel in your home, that model would always involve releasing CO2. That's just how it worked. But now we're crossing into the 21st century. People are starting to care about emissions, and it's costing money. Governments are starting to collect carbon taxes.
CO2 taxes, and yes, that would raise the prices.
And that's why this mattered. Because while the coal plant itself didn't work, it showed that heating from electricity could work. Coal plants were a disaster, but we could swap in anything at the end of those power lines. Now it's 2010. You started hearing about all these new ways of producing energy. But you live somewhere that, like most places, isn't consistently windy or sunny. Every day you drive past this new power plant that they've been building for the better part of a decade.
The uranium atom, it splits apart.
Nuclear technology was a revolution unlike anything else in human history. But the most striking thing about it in the history of energy, in our story, is how familiar it is. Like everything else, it starts with a fuel. Now the equivalent energy is in 1.2 milligrams of uranium, a 60th of a grain of sand.
The heat output of 1 pound of uranium can equal 70 tons of coal.
To mine it and enrich it, we spend a similar amount of energy. And from there, the way we turn it into electricity is also the same. Heat from a nuclear reaction creates steam, turns a turbine, electricity. And just like with coal, that conversion into electricity is really inefficient. And so in terms of efficiency, the amount of energy we end up with versus the amount that we started with, nuclear looks a lot like coal. A lot of energy is wasted getting it into these power lines. But in terms of CO2, the other half of this question, nuclear is very different. Among all the fuels, these bits of matter that release energy, uranium is unique. The CO2 created by nuclear is on the same level as renewables like wind or hydro. But at the same time, it produces energy just like a lot of these other solid fuels. Energy that's available for households, whether it's sunny or windy, night or day. But now it's 2020, and after running on coal for a century, your town just swapped its coal plant for a nuclear plant. Great, your carbon footprint is smaller. But that's not what's most important to you. What's most important to you is price. You were told that a nuclear plant would bring electricity costs down. And so you reinstalled those electric baseboards to heat your house. But the price has only come down very slowly. And it sucks because now heating makes up the majority of your electrical bill. But now we've arrived in 2025, and you just hired someone to install a different type of electric heater. This one goes on the side of your house. Heat pumps have been around for decades, but now they're getting really popular. And so you've torn out those electric baseboards and switched on your new heat pump. Okay, I should pause here to say that for the sake of our visualization, something weird is about to happen. Remember, baseboards were already 100% efficient. We don't lose any energy turning electricity into heat. We already conquered this part of the process. Heat pumps are the quiet miracle of this story. And honestly, this didn't even really make sense to me in researching this video. Basically, normal heaters use electricity to heat up a coil, like an electric stove. But heat pumps do something different. They pump heat. They pull the little bit of heat that is technically present even in cold winter air, and they push it into your house. They don't turn electricity into heat, they use it to gather heat. And so your energy bill suddenly changes. For every unit of energy the heat pump receives, it's able to pull in 3 units of energy, heat. So with a heat pump, now you only need 1/3 of the energy to heat your home. And so your electricity bill gets chopped. But it also means something for where our story ends when it comes to CO2. With the heat being tripled at the end of the chain, suddenly the CO2 per unit of heat plummets even further. Another way to think of this tripling of energy at the end of the chain is that to get the same amount of energy as before, now you only release 1/3 of the CO2. There's a lot of controversy about energy production, about fuels and CO2, but we can't lose sight of the fact that this is a long project to get more energy from the world around us. The motivations for wanting that have changed over time, but it's something we all want. More energy, less cost. And the news is good for everyone. This is a story of exponential progress. From the first sparks of heat from a chunk of a fallen tree, to a surge of energy from a tiny pellet of uranium. From energy that would slip through our fingers, to heat that somehow multiplies. This isn't the end of the journey, but if we look back, this is an amazing story. And it continues.